Welcome to Main Street, Nevada County. My name is Jim Firth. I'm the host of Main Street, Nevada County. Our guest today is Peggy Levine. Peggy is the House Ambassador for the North Star Historic Conservancy here in Nevada County. The Conservancy is dedicated to rehabilitating and revitalizing the former home of Arthur and Mary Foote, and now headquarters of the Conservancy. For the past decade, the Conservancy has raised funds and organized all of the work by volunteers and professionals to bring the house back to its present state. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you.
Would you like to give a more complete overview of the formation and activities involved by the Conservancy, and in particular, the current activities found at the North Star House?
Well, it's kind of fun to. I've been involved for more than 10 years, and I got started as a volunteer. We had a long list of volunteers over the 10 years, a long list. And my first job was to pull weeds and pick up broken glass because the house had been so heavily vandalized, all the windows broken, all this stuff. It had a fence around it to protect it, but vandals still got in and partied and painted and paintballed and graffiti all over the house. And it was really, if you have a love for buildings and for history and a passion for all of these things, it's really hard to see that, and it's really hard to understand. But the property was vacant for 10, 15 years, and it was just an ideal hiding place. So, as I said, we've been working on it since then, and lots of community support. Growers Market is out there on Saturday mornings from 8 until 12:30. If you have not been, it's a great time to tour the house. It's always open. Mm-hmm. We just have so many stories to tell and so many wonderful people involved.
That's great. There's an excellent website that is associated with the Conservancy that I would ask that I think we're going to have the address on the screen, but maybe you can explain a little bit of what's on the website for the listeners here so they can get a preview of what they're going to see when they visit.
The website has some of the history and many of the stories to tell, and it's ever changing. We just made a new one. We're upgrading it and getting it out more. But it tells you, of course, how you can volunteer and come and help us. And some of the events going on, and we have a couple of events this summer that we are sponsoring that are fundraisers. We have Fair Use by Sands Hall, and then later on we have a jazz evening. But a lot of other groups use the facility, use the house, use the grounds, and some of that will be on the website. So just learning the story is wonderful.
So the building itself is pretty good size, I guess, and then the property around it. What kind of property were you referring to in terms of the grounds?
We were when Sandy Sanderson bought the 700 acres of the North Star mine in 03-04. He wanted to develop it, worked with the county and got some of it going, but in 08 he couldn't maintain it. So it went back to the bank, and but before, when he first got it, he gave 14 acres to the Nevada County Land Trust, and which included the house and 3 other structures, and it was a gift. Mm-hmm. So it is 14 acres. Now the rest of those 700 acres is owned by Newmont. They have always had the mining rights as they do under the Empire Mine. And they are doing some site cleanup and working with the city on things. But we have our 14 acres, and the land trust is in what was the gardener's cottage, and that's their office now, Bear Yuba Land Trust, and they're in there. And then we have someone on site in the other, what was the assay office that lives there. And then we have the Haig House, which was the mine owner's house up on the top of the hill. And there are a few organizations looking at that. That's going to take a little work, but it's a nice, quiet, nice location. So we have, and then parking, 200 at least cars. We have the garden that we get, we're doing we've preserved a lot of the trees that the Foot and plants that the Foots had, the roses, all that. More stories to tell. And we are doing a heritage garden, which will be an excellent photos stop and history, overview of the property and the family. And this, just as I said, there's just more stories.
So it's the building's been there for a while.
Yeah.
It's James Haig was the mine owner, and he hired Julia Morgan.
Well,
to help with
the house. The James Haig's wife was Arthur D. Wint's Foot's sister. So Arthur and Mary Halleck Foote traveled the West in various mining locations in the 1880s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and so their last stop was this family connection. And there was a cottage on site then that they lived in at first, but they needed a bigger space, and with the connections, the Foots had worked with George Hearst up in Montana, and so they're, and at the turn of the century, Phoebe Hearst was in Berkeley. And who did she meet in Berkeley? I mean, two amazing women, and so she met Julia Morgan, who was just getting started, and we think that's the connection, that Julia Morgan would have come up and seen the property and just the mining, the history, the people they knew. And you remember that it's a very small social world in that era. There were the mine owners, the mine managers, and the doctors, lawyers, bankers, who all lived in Nevada City, and
okay,
and all of that. So they all knew each other. So the connection was made. It's Julia Morgan's second residential design. And it is now a National Trust historic landmark because of the amazing history. You have an architect of real fame who designed it.
Sure.
You have a mining engineer who lived there, who did quite a few things in the West in his career. The best, happiest part, maybe in some ways, was the end at North Star. He was more successful there. And then you have his wife, Mary Halleck Foote, who was a writer and illustrator and traveled the West. So you have these amazing people connecting in this space in our community and, developing Foote worked, they worked on the engineering at that time with the mines, with the electricity, with the water, with all this stuff. So you just go back and think, in that period of time, 100 years ago, it's kind of like now, where we have a really incredible community of movers and shakers, and we've got Grass Valley Group was here. All this same thing 100 years ago.
Right.
So we want so these people were very important, all three of them, and then you have the site, you have the mine, you have the importance of the mine. So the property is really significant nationally.
So the land, the 14 acres, is such an integral part of the whole conservancy project. And I think we're fortunate that your volunteers are looking at doing some revitalization of the garden. With the roses and with the trees. And we'll have some of that on video. We did a little video when we were out there last week to show viewers some of the progress that's taking place at the house. Hi, Peggy. Thank you so much for meeting me out here today at North Star House. We're going to have a little tour of the house and some of the grounds and see what we can find out from your perspective about where we're going to be able to go in the future.
We've been at it for 10 years, a lot of volunteers and help, and you can't do it historically accurately because we want accessibility. We want, those kinds of things so everyone can come here. It's a wonderful piece of history. Arthur DeWint Foote and his wife Mary Halleck Foote, the house was built for them by the mine owner, James Haig, and part of their job was to entertain investors and to have young mining engineers maybe stay here. He was so involved in mining at the time, at the turn of the century, 100 years ago, in water power, electricity, all that stuff that he had done in other parts of the country. And as they traveled the West with his earlier jobs, she wrote and illustrated where they were. So this house and this land, the whole site, is really important to Nevada County and the history, and so much happened here and then migrated down to the Bay Area.
Great. Why don't we take a look inside at some of the ongoing projects?
It's so important to our community to be able to tell this story. In Mary Halleck Foote's study room in there, we have a lot of photographs, and we're very lucky that we have them and that they date back as far as they do. Upstairs, the roof leaked.
Yeah.
And the first go-around we got with the county, the land trust did in '04, was some money to put the roof back on. We gutted this whole thing.
Right.
Just gutted the whole thing. And put it all back together.
Right. So this is a commercial kitchen now as well?
No, it's a catering kitchen. Caterers work outdoors a lot.
So you can set up a barbecue outside?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yes. Carol is a board member of the North Star House Conservancy and the head of the Heritage Gardens.
Well, the garden is meant to represent Arthur D. Foote's interest in horticulture, his horticultural skills, and his affiliation with both Luther Burbank and Felix Gillet. Specimens that will be in the garden, we will reproduce his roses for sure, and some of the other major plants that were found on the property, like hydrangeas and a big snowball bush and a muck orange.
I can see you've got some of the area designated for certain things. I'm guessing
That's
roses
right.
around the
Yes,
perimeter?
well, we're going to have roses along this path and on this side.
Well, thank you very much for sharing with us, and we're certainly going to look forward to having people visit and see the garden as it begins to explode in color. But in I guess up till 1968, the family did reside. Still,
Yeah,
even
the
though
descendants,
mining operations were
the Foote's
gone.
son, Sonny, and his wife stayed in the house until the end of their lives, and their 3 daughters decided to sell it because they couldn't care for it and the property and the house. And so it was purchased by a man who made it into a home for troubled teens, a school and all that, but it really wasn't financially viable for him. So he lost it to the bank, 15 years later, and then that's when it sat. And we like to use the term, we cannot totally restore it. We are rehabilitating it and trying to save everything we can, but for the community, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be, all these things to make it useful for today. So we say rehabilitation, but there's lots of possibilities beyond what we've even done for it.
Well, again, in our tour the other day, we saw some of how you've been able to restore some of the woodwork that's there, how you've restored some of the wall structure. There's a very unique method of doing wire and plaster. That was Julia Morgan's innovation within that building. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned and relearned there, just in terms of how to create an efficient home. Especially one of the size that North Star House is, which I believe is in the neighborhood of 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, it is. And as I said, they had servants, but they also had rooms for visitors and the mining engineers. Mary Halleck Foote was always used to having a little help. It's amazing when you read her reminiscences about how she lived in some of these areas in the West, a woman from upstate Hudson River, New York, with an upper class kind of background coming out, and she is an inspiring person to me. But anyway, yeah, no, we've saved as much as we can. The interior woodwork, a lot of it is cedar, and some of the pieces were, well, you can't get a cedar tree like that anymore. So it's been a work in progress. And Joe Grandywood Designs, he's Joe Grandy at Grandywood Designs, is doing the ceiling and the walls in the library. And he goes at it gradually, brings the pieces out. So many amazing connections in the community. But yeah, we're trying to save it, and the wire and plaster, that got Julia Morgan a lot of jobs right after the earthquake, because it's wire plaster is a lot less of a fire hazard than lath and plaster.
Sure.
So she got some jobs. This was a big step for her.
Now, will the Conservancy have available for visitors a list of resource materials that they can go to either when they're visiting the house or on the website if you wanted to read more about the Foots or about Julia Morgan and some of her other architectural gems?
Yeah, we have several of Julia Morgan's books. We have Mary Halleck Foot's books. We have displays and always of even like our application for the National Trust. There's a lot of information just in that. So we have all that there for people to look at when they tour the house. And so you could sit down and spend a bit of time just reading and looking and
And it's so comfortable to do. I mean, I was sitting in one of the chairs that it looked as though it belonged there. It seemed to be a replica of one that had been there. A rocking chair, and then there was a stationary chair of same design.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to sit and to feel what it was like to be in that environment. That
living room is wonderful, and it's a great little stopping spot. And we're trying, we look for the light fixtures. And we do fortunately have pictures. So we look for the light fixtures, and we have, people who can help us with that. So we try and then of course the kitchen's done, and it's a catering kitchen, and it is a little more contemporary because you need that. You can't, and we didn't really have any pictures of the kitchen to work with. But.
Okay. And we don't have pictures that we were able to take when we visited last week, but we do have, I think, some photos of the kitchen as it's being utilized these days.
Yeah.
And it's good to know that North Star House is available for folks to use for events. I believe Circle has done events there. There are weddings that take place. What are some of the other organizations or events that you see as potential users of the facility, and how do they go about?
Well, they get in touch with us on the website. There's a connection. You can call the house. A nice time to come is the Saturday mornings because a few of us are there, and eventually we'll be open. Our office will be open a little bit more, but I think it has. We're wireless. They can. I think it's potentially a nice retreat space for some of our businesses. Partly the historical connection in today, but just come out there for the day and have some quiet time during the week. So there's those potentials. We have an educational element that we always are working on. We'll, bringing groups out that want to hear the story and sort of get a feel for it. So there's that, But there's a lot we can do for the community, and we'd like to see a little more of the businesses being active. I mean, the chambers have come out there. The Kiwanis uses it. FireSafe has done a couple of events out there. It's going to build.
Sure.
There's just it has the wonderful indoor-outdoor potential because there's good sized space inside. So even in the winter where, we have indoor heating, but in the winter you can have 50, 60 people in there in a kind of casual manner. You could serve dinner, you could, all sorts of things like that. And then you do have the outdoors. You have a sheltered front terrace part of it, so there's little in and out. But in the summer, you can use, fall and spring, you can use outside and inside, which is really, there's not a lot like that in the area, where you can kind of move around a little.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really like about North Star House is its multifaceted usability.
Yeah.
Do you see, more arts organizations taking advantage of the space for shows in the future, or music venues? Is that something
we get music?
Consider?
Yeah, we get music. I mean, the courtyard is an excellent spot for music. We've had assorted people out there doing things, and it's quiet. The sound, if you use the courtyard, it doesn't project out into the world. I mean, they can't hear us at the fairgrounds. We can hear the fairgrounds, but they can't really hear us using it the way we use it. So, and arts, we've had watercolor classes there. There's some other groups that are interested in spending time out. That'd be, 4 or 5 days during the week to do something. And there have been a few classes, and that's another bit of potential. And then, there's ideas when we get to the second floor, which is a little while away, but we've few folks in the community who have collections of local artists that date back would like to see a place to display some of these things. And we might be that, but that's a little ways away. But, you entertain and talk to people about different ideas. And it because of the connection of Mary Halleck Foote being an artist and her husband being an engineer, we just kind of segue into a large parts of the community.
For sure.
And so the history will draw all that together.
Right, and it would be a perfect venue for those to come together.
Yeah.
My opinion, at least.
Yeah. No, there's a lot there.
Right, and then, I don't know, is there anything you need in terms of North Star House? You mentioned that volunteers are always welcome. Are there particular skills or other attributes of folks that you would request so that people can spend some time, quality time, in that beautiful facility?
Well, there's the docents. We have a growing group of docents who Saturday mornings, but other times when we have events that are community events, we like having a docent or two there to show people around, tell the story. So there's those kinds of things. The team is out there. The construction team volunteers are out there today, and they are painting and refinishing wood. We actually take some of the paneling off the walls, refinish it, put it back. So then that goes on, and then of course there's the grounds group, that's putting together the Heritage Garden. So there's that. We have a little sign up that you can do. Okay. You can fill out a little form and tell us what you like to do, and I'm sure that we can find a place for you.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of time with us today.
You're welcome.
I would encourage people to visit the website either before or after you've had a chance to visit the Saturday morning market at North Star House. And how would people get there easily? What are the
North
directions?
Star House is opposite, you go McCourtney, front of the fairgrounds, opposite gate 3 of the fairgrounds. You wrap yourself around, make a left turn on Old Auburn or Auburn Road. Go, it's called both, but down not even half a mile, and the house is on your right, and there's a nice little sign that says North Star House, and you just make a little, the house is on your left. Did I say right? Yeah, because what I try to say is there's an old barn on your right, and then the house is on your left up the hill. Right. And it's pretty clear.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you again. And I hope to see some of you out at North Star House during the summer markets.
So do I.